is a very cheap process. You don't have to do mass spec to look at the source of the nitrogen, because that's already been done. If neighboring wells are contaminated, then maybe you want to reintroduce mass spec to determine the source of the contamination for liability purposes. The other thing that surprised me is a $10,000 to $14,000 cost for a hydrogeologist to analyze the data and make a report. And I would submit that all you need is a modicum of intelligence to be able to interpret whether the neighboring wells are affected or not. So if we see a consistent rise in nitrate and nitrite levels, then the neighboring wells would appear to be affected. You don't need years of education to figure this out. And the other thing I would like to emphasize is that we should be looking at nitrite as well, because nitrite can oxidize hemoglobin to methemoglobin, causing the hemoglobin no longer to have the ability to carry oxygen. And this is really very critical, especially for infants and young children. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Jens Lipgott, and I'm a trustee in the Cobble Hill Improvement District. I don't know if you want to join the more than 100 communities in Canada who have no safe drinking water. The May 22nd staff report stated that tests for the 4 wells on Fisher Road would cost approximately $24,000. When I contacted our improvement district, they would do it for $750. So I don't know where they got the number from. In June, I informed the Electoral Area Services Committee that the Cobble Hill Improvement District could cover the cost of testing the Fisher Road well as no cost to CVRD, gratis. The August 7th staff report suggests that either the Cobble Hill Improvement District or the Fisher Road composting dump could do this testing. The referred May 22nd staff report stated that the recycling plant is not in compliance after almost 20 years of working in the suspected contamination problem. The composting operation of 1355 Fisher Road was issued a pollution prevention order by ENV in 2018 due to issues with the compost management practices. This operation is currently working to meet the requirements under this order. They're still not there. Why would we have a suspected polluter test the water? It would be like the foxes guarding the hen house. Cobble Hill Improvement District, with an up-to-date certified technician, has a priority to meet the water quality standards. I urge this committee to accept the offer from Cobble Hill Improvement District to test all the Fisher Road wells, with the results being public. Going forward, we need to avoid any further risky delays for the almost 20% of the Covington Valley residents who are affected. I wonder if I can give some handouts to the members.
Typically, it's difficult to have last-minute information come, but I'll grant your request if you just want to hand it to a director at the end and we can pass them around. Thank you. And thank you for the input.
I have a challenge. I can't see you without my glasses, but I can't see the words with them.
It's okay. I appreciate that you want to see me, but
yeah.
I think your words are more important.
I'm going with
Absolutely.
the writing. Don Harriet, Cobble Hill. I'm also a trustee with the Cobble Hill Improvement District. I too would like to address the issue of groundwater in the Cobble Hill area. I'm very concerned. I saw the staff report again and an article in the Citizen where the CVRD continues to maintain that they're not responsible. I'm going to repeat what I've said before, and unfortunately, I'm going to repeat it again and again and again until there is some action taken. In my opinion, it is nonsensical that the CVRD is not responsible. The CVRD rezoned the property in the Fisher Road area initially to allow composting where there was none before. The CVRD defined the operational requirements for these licenses. They issued the licenses. They've granted amendments to the licenses to allow expansion over the objection of the community time and time again. They wrote the bylaw that governs the facility, and they monitor the activities and supposedly carry out any remediation orders that are required. So I just don't see how you can deny responsibility when it is your licensed facility. Also troubling to me is it appears there's different standards depending where you live in the CVRD. In the instance of the contaminated soil site in Area B, we spent upwards of $1 million fighting that issue, which to the residents of Area B was an important issue. But the courts clearly ruled that that was not CVRD jurisdiction, it was provincial jurisdiction, and yet we continued to fight for that. That was for an operation that had the potential to have groundwater contamination at some point. Whereas in Cobble Hill, your own engineering reports have shown, and your own staff reports show, that there is groundwater contamination identified. And the Thurber report show that that contamination source is the facilities that you license and manage. So really, really frustrating. We hear time and time again, especially when we have a federal election coming, that people don't trust politicians. We're disconnected from the process. There's no more glaring example to me as why the trust is broken. Is this here? Thank you.
So I would ask that people not clap, but I appreciate your support for the speaker. Thank you, Mr. Harriet.
Good afternoon. My name is Jim Walsh. I live in Cobble Hill. I've been a resident for 25 years. I read this report from the staff recommending that, or saying that they were working with Fisher Road Recycling to monitor the wells. I mean, how ridiculous is that? You've got a provincial government polluter monitoring the wells. We can't even get the well report for their own well, which we know is contaminated, that they continue to use for dusting down and watering down the ground, which goes right back into our aquifer. This is a no-brainer. The big report was that they didn't have funds. We have the Cobble Hill Improvement District with a licensed, certified waterman to do the testing and give it to the CVRD for free. There should be no reason not to accept this offer. Thank you.
I'm Brenda Lockhart. I live basically across the road from Fisher Road Recycling. And we moved there in '91, well before the composting facility was allowed to go in. Back in 2002, this is a few years after we had concerns about the contamination, we had our CVRD, you guys, tested our well, and the nitrate level was at 1.79. It wasn't tested again until 2010. It was up to 2.57. The CVRD did it again in January 2013, 2.75. We thought you guys were continuing to look after us, but obviously this wasn't the case. So we took it upon ourselves in March of 2017 to test our own well at our own expense. It had jumped to 313. Again, October 2017, we tested our well again, 3.21. Ministry of Environment finally came around last July, 3.75. Obviously, the numbers are still going up, and it's still safe. Yes, it's under the 10, but it's still going up, so why? Why aren't you guys investigating this? It's not just my well, it's Cobble Hill, Arbutus Ridge, Braithwaite. There's a lot of people involved here, and I hate for you guys to be caught negligent in looking after it. Thank you.
I'm Doug Lockhart. I live on the end of Gallagher's Road. I watched the initial West Coast Waste Diversion go in, and about 1998, 99, we put up with all sorts of promises from the CVRD that was going to be monitoring West Coast Waste Diversions. There was all sorts of strange things that happened with the real estate when it went in, but that doesn't need to come into this. But suffice to say that we've had promises since 1998, 99, and 2001, 2002, when there was about 2 inches of black goo all over the property one long weekend. In fact, it would have been probably just about exactly it was Labor Day weekend. And at that point, because there was situations with another property owner wanting to put a sewage disposal field on the adjacent property in between me and that property, they said that they would never be allowed to do it. The reason why was because of the fact that it was a sand basin and whatever went on top of the ground would be in the aquifer. They have proven that whatever goes on the top of that property ends up in the aquifer within 24 hours. Now we have a situation where we have this black goo on the property, which was put on there because of the fires that were happening in the place and the place going up in flames. Now we end up with us, in 2002, I managed to get the CVRD and the province to go ahead and take samples of all the wells, including the well on the property. The well on the property was so polluted that they had to shut it down. It is still being used, but it's being used, as Jim said, to water down the property. So that water that's contaminated with nitrites and nitrates is going back into the aquifer. So on and on we go. CVRD licenses, CVRD hires Bob McDonald. He's going to write the solid waste. It's going to be this, it's going to be that, it's going to be great. The air is going to be clean. You're not going to have dirty clothes coming off the line with all of the garbage that's going into the air. The sound, we won't be running 7 days a week. They're now running 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. We're in the situation where the CVRD writes the license, but the thing that bothers me most is the fact that the CVRD also has the licensing of utilizing that facility to get rid of its recycling products. So it's in a conflict of interest, in my opinion. But at this point, when we all know that nitrates and nitrates can cause the stunting of development of brains in babies, we have a few people with families in the Cobble Hill area. And there's also Francis Hugo, who is an expert in this field, brought forward that it also causes problems with cancer formation because of this. So here we are with $750,000 that the CVRD staff themselves lobbied to make sure that we had this money, plus Diana and a few other people found another $12,000, and we don't have the will to monitor this water. So are we going to wait for a Walkerton? Are we going to wait for a huge medical situation and deaths to arise? Or are we going to do something about it now? And I suggest if we don't, this is willful neglect, and there should be some sort of action taken.
Thank you very much, and we are out of time. So thank you all for your input, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Legault for our next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is the delegation. Brad Grieger and Peggy Grieger, past president, Chemainus Valley Cultural Arts Society, with an update on recent and future planned activities, and the recommendation is for information.
Welcome, Mr. Grigor.
Hello, Aaron. How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Hello, everyone.
I'm Mr. Chair here, Brad.
What's that?
I said I'm Mr. Chair here.
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Welcome.
I do have some slides on a
Our
USB
tech support is well on its way.
Yep.
We'll give you a few moments before we start the clock because we run a tight ship here for timing.
Which way? That folder, yeah, and the, yeah, that would work. Okay, great, thanks.
No worries.
Perfect. All right, well, my name is Brad Grigor, and I'm here representing a bit of a mouthful. It's called the Chemainus Valley Cultural Arts Society, otherwise known as CVCAS. Many of you will know of us, but some of you might not know the name or what it actually stands for. I'd like to, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here to introduce ourselves more formally and tell you what we've been doing with the funds that you folks kindly grant us annually, what our success rate has been, what our track record is, and where we are today, and some of the things we're looking forward to doing. So thanks very much to the CVRD for their support for the arts in our region and for the annual financial support that they give the arts councils, including the CVCAS, every year. CVCAS has actually been fostering the arts and culture in CVRD and beyond for over 20 years. In fact, in the early 1980s, the group was formed from a number of local musicians who wanted to perform for the community, But it wasn't until 2001 that the CVCAS was formally registered as a society. And then later in 2015, CVCAS was recognized by the CVRD as one of the 5 local arts councils, sort of sub-regional arts councils operating within the CVRD. This gives you an idea of the area that the CVCAS serves. It's primarily Chemainus and CVRD electoral area G, Thetis Island, Saltaire, Crofton, and Maple Bay. But also we have members from all over Vancouver Island. And part of that is due to the success we've had in developing multiple forms of art, both the music programs and the Rainforest Arts Gallery. The organization has been very, very busy, mostly event-oriented over the last 20 years. You may recognize many of these events that we put on, such as blues festivals, open mic events. The Music in the Park series is extremely successful. It happens every Tuesday night throughout the summer in the Waterwheel Band Shell. But we've also put on arts and ethnic festivals, the Bluegrass Festival, and many others. Accordion Days, for those who love that instrument, and jazz festivals as well. This gives you an idea of some of the programs that we've been doing over the last 20 years. It's been a very busy group. It's entirely volunteer run. But some of the more recent initiatives I'd like to introduce. First, some of you may recall that CVCAS was a partner in the Art Beat Street Festival in Chemainus for a number of years running. They happened on Friday nights, and we opened up the street, brought in artists, had music, and it was a great event, and it was very successful and widely attended. The CVCS is also running Pat's House of Jazz, which operates September to June in Crofton at the Osborne Bay Pub. Very successful program. We also started the Polka Dot Trail, which is an art studio tour in the Chemainus Valley area. We ran Lady Day at Emerson's Bar and Grill. Now, I don't know if any of you attended that. It was kind of sold out, standing room only. I think we had maybe only 3 or 4 engagements. We could have done more if we had had a venue to put it in. And in 2016, we opened the Rainforest Arts Gallery. I'll say a bit more about that later, but it has been fabulously successful, and we'd really like to grow that. So if you haven't been in the Rainforest Arts Gallery, I encourage you to go up there, take a look at it. It is one of the best, and it's still open. So how well are we doing today? Well, in 2019, the CVCS has put on 7 music festivals in the summer, attracting thousands of visitors to the Waterwheel Park. The Music in the Park series are so successful, it's been like standing room only for the last 3 Tuesdays. We have 400 to 500 people attending these. The one that I do recall was over 400 people attending the Deaf Aids on August 6th. But I took a little video at La Familia, who performed on October 20th, and I don't know whether any of you were there, but we had even council members were dancing. It was standing room only. And then I'm told last night, for the final show of the season, we had Tropic Mayhem, and again, standing room only. So this is the sort of event we put on. This is the sort of results we get, and people love it. And they come from miles around, not just Chemainus, but from all over. To give you another idea of how well we're doing, Rainforest Arts Gallery showcases over 60 artists in only 400. Is that better? We were fortunate to have been supported by the Coastal Community Credit Union, who allowed us to take over their insurance office area at the front of the branch. So we have the store, we have the street front windows, but it's only 485 square feet. It lacks a lot of the facilities you would want to have in an enterprise environment like that. But in July, sales this year were triple those of the same time last year. It's growing, it's very popular, people love it, and they're coming from all around. And because we are taking a Vancouver Island view of the arts, we have members from Victoria, Gabriola, Yubo, all over the island. We currently have 150 registered members in the CVCAS, but as I say, these are not just from the Chemainus Valley, they're from all over. So what are we working on now? We have a number of initiatives that are in play. We're partnering with First Nations to erect 3 totem poles in Chemainus. We are partnering with First Nations to present arts and cultural events in the carving shed at Waterwheel Park. It's something that was built but is not being used, and we want to get it being used. We're working with First Nations Artist Liaison to get greater First Nations representation at Rainforest Arts. We have a lot of First Nations art represented there, but we'd like to do more. We're looking to expand the Rainforest Arts Gallery, which has quickly outgrown its space. We need more square footage for washroom facilities, storage, and some office space, which we don't have where we're currently located. We face a number of challenges. I've got a number of them listed here. They're in your packages. One of them is that the band shell is really only usable for 2 to 3 months of the year, so that's why most of our music programs are limited to the summer. But you can see what we're achieving in terms of attendance, and we're now striking record attendances. Imagine what we could do if we had a year-round facility. Rainforest Arts, of course, is very cramped. They'd love to grow. They'd love to have a proper facility that they could offer to all of the 60 or more artists that are present. We have so many ideas and very limited physical facilities to produce them. And our local arts community is looking to us as the Sub-Regional Arts Council to see if we can provide more support for them. Of course, the population is growing, and we've been talking to tourist groups like the Vancouver Island Tourists and the Cowichan Tourism. And we've been told that we can expect 3 to 4% year-over-year growth in tourism over the next little while. So that's growing fairly significantly, which leads us to want to develop a community arts center in North Cowichan, CVRD, hopefully in or near the Chemainus Valley operating area where we do our work. To pursue this, the CVCS formed a committee called the A-Team, or the Arts Team, and our mandate was primarily to develop an Arts Center strategy and an implementation plan for the CVCAS. And we're represented by members of the Chamber, the Community School Board, the Mural Society, the Rotary, and Penelakut First Nations, as well as independent artists such as myself. And here's a picture of some of our team members. From the left to right, we have Wendy Lambert from CCSA, Lori Frankson from the Chamber. I'll skip over the third guy.
Mr. Grigor, I just want to give you a heads up. You have 30 seconds left.
30 seconds.
Yeah, we can
All
see
right.
the names there and see the faces.
Okay, so you have seen our package. I would encourage you to read our strategic plan for the Community Arts Center. It lays out our vision statement. It lays out the rationale. There are 3 primary market opportunities that we feel could be fulfilled with this. It would be an economic stimulus to the region as well as Chemainus and North Cowichan. And we would see it being an arts-oriented community center serving many public interest areas as well as the arts. And we've listed quite a number of the use cases that we would apply this to. It's not just an art gallery, it's an arts center. And it's not just an arts center, it would be a community arts center. We would look to support 85% for local arts and culture, 15% for external exhibitions and events. We found a consultant to help us do a feasibility study.
I don't want to push you through. If you'd like a little bit more time, I can ask the board to grant that. So it's been moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director Marsh. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed? Continue.
Thank you.
Hey, go back a couple slides and take your time.
Okay.
Well, not too much time, but.
Well, in our strategic plan, which is in your packages, we've defined a number of use cases and we've defined the kind of general shape and size of an art center we're looking for. We wanted to have both classrooms, a performance hall, some art gallery space, and a place for rainforest arts to grow. But we also wanted to serve certain other public functions such as community group activities, social gatherings. We see the need for emergency response mustering area as well. This building could serve that as well as its primary purposes. Now, our goal would be to be 85% support for local arts, which we're currently doing. We want to continue doing that, and that's been successful. But we would help finance this by bringing in external exhibitions and events for about 15% or so of the resources to help provide the revenue stream to support it. In the strategic plan, we've outlined a one-page business plan, very high level, but it gives you an idea of what we're thinking. But we have to do our homework. We've met with quite a number of consultants in this area, and the tourism groups, and financial people, Coastal Community Credit Union, for example, and people that build co-ops. And they've all said, yeah, this sounds like it's spot on. We see the need for this. This would probably work, but you need to get an independent feasibility study. You can't just go on your own say-so. So we, over the course of the last autumn and early part of the year, put out an RFP for consultants to do a feasibility study on exactly this kind of thing. We found somebody, happens to live in Shawnigan, now works for RWDI as the Theatre Planning, Design and Management Group in Victoria. World-class consultants, done hundreds of these things. He is supporting us, and he has given us a fantastic proposal for a feasibility study. His name is Rick Schick. And we picked his proposal over many others. We even got some from Ontario. They were very expensive. But he had the local context. He understood what we were trying to achieve, and he's very pragmatic. He said the first thing you need to do is ensure you size and scope this properly. Don't make it too big, but also don't make it too small. In order to support this feasibility study, we started a pledge drive in July. So we've raised over $6,400 in pledges already from residents and visitors, not just from Chemainus, but also Ladysmith, Nanaimo, Victoria, and even Texas have given us money to help us fund this feasibility study. We've obtained a number of letters of support. You'll see those in the package. This is all about branding. It's our belief that there is actually a lack of capacity in the CVRD to meet the growing population's demands for arts and culture and the tourism demands for arts and culture. When I was doing the reference checks for Rick Schick, before we gave him the our bid for the feasibility study, he gave us some references. I talked to Lloyd Fitzsimmons, Executive Director at the Royal and Macpherson Theatre Society in Victoria. He said, if you build it, they will come. If you need proof of that, look no further than the Chemainus Theatre itself. So he gave us a real vote of support for what we're trying to do. So what we ask of the CVRD is that you build that brand with us, that you would provide a letter of support for the CVCS Community Arts Center project, and that you'll participate in the interviews with our consultant during the feasibility study. And thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you. I'll go to the board if you'd like to remain up there if there's any questions. So none. Dr. Acton.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation and your enthusiasm for the arts. I'm just curious, and you're probably going to say yes, but I hope you've connected with the group in Cowichan Bay. What do you know their name? They came. They wanted to do an art gallery.
Yeah.
Have you connected with them?
There's another group that wants to open a gallery.
Yeah, and we've met with them and we've had
'Cause
discussions with them.
They have a big vision as well. And
Yeah, they
partner
do.
with them would be good.
Now, what we're looking at doing is quite different. Our motivation is economic development and stimulus for our region through arts and culture. We know that the CVRD has an economic development group. We want to work on the arts and culture part of that economic development plan. What Jacques Hillebrand and his group are doing is an art gallery. There are some significant differences between an art gallery and what their mandate would be, and a community arts center, which has entirely different mandates. You'll know that they are looking at only, about 15% local art support. They're not looking to support the local art scene. They're looking at bringing in external art, about 85%. Our goal would be the reverse of that. An art gallery is primarily for the exhibition of art. An art center is going to be both for the exhibition and sale of our local art, but also classroom space and so on. So yeah, we've talked to them, and between the two of us, we feel there is room for both. If you look at the demographics and you look at the growth projections, this region can sustain both.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll go to Director Marsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to Mr. Grigor. I think this is such a great idea, and I'm thinking of Pearson College has, I'm not sure if you're aware, but they have sort of summer schools where artists go and different artists come and teach, and I found your presentation made me think, gosh, maybe there could be a partnership with Penelakut on Tent Island, and people could come and learn. I just think it could really grow, and I hope the board will give you a letter of support. I don't know what the process will be to go through that, but it made me feel excited. And I happen to live in Chemainus. I've really noticed an increase in the Tuesday night and the festivals and the amount of dancing. And I think some of it, I used to cringe quite a bit because there's a hill that goes down to, I'm thinking, oh gosh, somebody's gonna break their leg. But now with the, what do you call where you walk? The cement labyrinth, which is right near the band shell. There's this safe dancing area. And to go and see kids from 1 to the kid in the 90-year-old up there, it's really been a really neat thing to see. So thank you very much. And I can see that this, if you could pull it off, would really be an incredible community building thing. We heard from Lake Cowichan about 2 years ago what they're doing up there, and I remember thinking, I want to go up there and take some of those classes. So it's exciting to know that that might happen closer.
More broadly speaking, we want to reinvigorate this brand that the Cowichan is an arts and culture destination. I know Chemainus had been with the murals. It needs to be, we need to double down on rebuilding that brand, and you need to do that by expanding. You either are growing or you're dying, and I want to go the other way. I want to grow.
Thank you. I have Director Sebring and then Director Smith. Director Smith, we are
Through the chair to Brad. Brad's my neighbor. I am very fortunate to have some very talented people all around me in Saltaire. I'm really excited about this project. One of the things I like about your strategic plan is you're saying that the objective is to operate under a self-sustaining, revenue-based business model for delivering arts and culture events, programs, and service. So I think I applaud that. So many groups are looking for continual financial support, and as the taxpayers' dollars become more and more stretched, it's nice to see a group that's looking at this type of model. I do enjoy arts. I have some very limited talents, and I always appreciate other talents that are out there. And as a valley, we have so many talented people. It's amazing. Every time you go out on the polka dot tour is a great way to just meet people in the community and what they're working towards. You've got so many great initiatives on your board there that it's not just about art on a backing. It's about inclusiveness of other parts of art and culture, and I really like that. I feel those are definitely benefits. We had a presentation this morning about the airport, Nanaimo Airport, and we were talking about how many people come into Nanaimo, and that this is an opportunity to include things that are going on in our island, and I'm really excited about your project.
Well, during our research, we met with folks from Drayton Enterprises, or Drayton Entertainment in Ontario. I don't know if you've heard of them. They run 7 theaters in southwestern Ontario outside the Metro Toronto area. They're completely self-sustained. They don't take a penny of public money. I don't know whether we could ever achieve that, but our goal would be that at least we're bringing in revenues through ticket sales to help offset the costs of running this facility that benefits the local art scene. I think that's a good way to try to go about it.
A quick follow-up, hopefully concise.
Do you have a facility available that you're looking at?
The feasibility study is going to look at that. We felt it's getting cart before the horse to go out and say, well, here's a building, let's use it. Buildings come and buildings go. We need to first make sure we understand the problem we want to solve, and then let's go find or buy or develop a solution to that problem. So the feasibility study would do a needs assessment first. Then they would talk to people like staff at CVRD and the municipality. They would then look at how can we incorporate this into municipal plans, and then let's look at where the space might be to do it. So we want to get this done in the right order.
Thank you. I just had a couple of comments. Have you solicited support from the other arts councils in the region?
Yes, we have, and we have more work to do. We're developing now a bit of a digital media campaign. We've got a little website up now. We want to keep the pledge drive going, and the CVCS is able to put on certain events that will help fund that pledge drive. And we have talked to several other representatives from other arts councils in the area. We feel that between the Cowichan Center and the Port Theatre, there is a space that needs something, and this is what we want to look at fulfilling.
Okay, so the follow-up to that would be, are you aware of the Arts and Heritage Hub development that's happening in Ladysmith right now?
Yes, but not to necessarily a great detail.
Okay, so yeah, and I think it's important, that's why I said have you engaged with the other arts councils,
Yeah.
because there is a significant performance space and classroom spaces being built just to the north right now. So it's just important to include that as the feasibility study. And in the letter of support, you mentioned, but then you're looking for a letter of support previous to completing the feasibility study?
Yes, we would like letters of support that will allow us to go out and apply for grants to help fund that feasibility study.
Okay, makes sense.
So the
Thank
more
you.
letters of support we can get, the better.
And then, just for clarity, there is a bit of funding that's received right now for the Arts Council, as there is with all the arts councils within the valley.
That's correct.
Okay.
And CVCS has pulled off a bunch of money that they're putting out of their own bank account into that feasibility study as well.
Yeah, and I think just like recreation, I think all governments need to be aware that supporting the arts through some funding is not necessarily a losing sum game. It's often the multiplier that your efforts bring that actually more than pay back the smallish contributions from local government. So
Oh, yeah.
it is really appreciated.
I think our BC Minister of Arts and Culture would agree with you.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I'll go to Director Morrison. You wanted to make a motion.
Move that this be referred to, I would assume, our arts and culture staff for the crafting of a letter of support.
That's been moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director Marsh. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Well, there you got one step down.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. Have a great afternoon. And over to Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's no correspondence, so on to reports. Item R1, report from the Environmental Services Division regarding CVRD Climate Adaptation Program, Natural Hazard Risk Tolerance Policy. And the recommendation for consideration is that it be recommended to the board that the Natural Hazard Risk Tolerance Policy, as attached in the Environmental Services Division's May 13, 2019 staff report, be approved.
Thank you. Moved by Director Marsh, seconded by Director Wilson. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in, Ms. Director Kuhn.
Yeah, I want to, attachment B, I looked at that. And there's some figures mentioned in there that I don't quite understand, and I'd like to have some more clarity on that. And I wonder if there's anybody here that can explain it to me.
Is there specific ones that you would like clarity on?
Yes, hold on here.
You mean attachment A, I presume?
Attachment A, yes.
Yeah.
But, what I'm wondering about is, for instance, the criteria, low stability factor of safety, more than 1.3. What does that mean? Do any of us know what that means? And if we don't, then don't we have any questions about that? Are we just going to say, oh yeah, let's go with it?
I believe actually that some of this was discussed at a previous meeting, but I'll put it through to staff because we did have a workshop on the natural hazards where we did have that opportunity, but I'd put that through to the appropriate staff.
We're trying to figure if the
Microphone works?
microphone will reach.
It sounds like it is.
I have a small voice, so I will use the microphone. So the policy was presented in 2 all-day workshops with the directors and other representatives from other local governments who were interested in the issue. So the primary objective here is to establish a life loss risk tolerance policy for decision-making within the CVRD. So if there is a risk greater than, say, if you look at attachment A on the 3rd page, greater than 1 in 1,000 annual frequency likelihood, so that's N, that would basically put you into the unacceptable zone. So you would have a policy that would allow Ian, or Mr. McDonald, for example, who is faced with a application for building in an extremely vulnerable location, to be able to say, no, that's not an appropriate location, or we need additional information. So the level below that, RLIP, is basically tolerable risk based on mitigative actions. If you go towards the right, which is the number of fatalities, so 1 fatality in a frequency of 1 to 1,000 years is unacceptable. That's the bottom of the threshold. As you start to move to the right, you have an increase in the number of fatalities. So for example, if you had an extremely unlikely occurrence of 1 in 1 million, but there were over 1,000 fatalities, it would trigger extreme scrutiny. So you want to make sure things like that buildings are built to the appropriate seismic code, those sorts of things. Over roughly 8,000 fatalities, you would start to say that is an unacceptable level of risk, but it's an extremely low frequency occurrence. So it allows you to say this is a frequency of, say, 1 in 1,000 years versus 1 in 10 or 1 million years. So you really start to sort of play with the sensitivity of the issue. So that's what that image is telling you, of where it is on the graph that helps drive your decision-making about the approval of either land use or infrastructure.
Sorry, follow-up, Director Kuhn.
Yeah, Mr. Hamilton.
Into the microphone if you could, just so that, no, you just turned it off, but.
Is that a fixed line that is drawn there, or would that be up to individual discussions or whatever? I'm just trying to find out, are we going to stick to that no matter what, or are we going to say, well, we will allow, let's say, 4 more houses or whatnot? I'm just kind of trying to find my way through here.
So I'm not sure the appropriate staff to put that to. I know the board has some authority and decision-making power when applications would come forward, for example, but I think the policy is attempting to set out a reasonable threshold and decision-making process that would allow engineers to make recommendations to the board. if you can expound on that or provide more clarity.
Absolutely. Thank you for the option. It's a very complex issue, so I really appreciate the questions. The other challenge that we're faced with, typically when we ask a property owner to hire an engineer to give some direction about whether something is safe or not, the engineer puts it in the context of their experience, their report. What we're asking for is also a standardized concept to be able to say, based on this criteria, what is the level of safety? So we're giving them a clear matrix in which to give us an answer to the question, is this house safe in this location? So they'll be able to look at the graph and put it on that particular point, or look at the stability factor of a particular location. So the information we're getting back from them is very structured. It will allow the board to say, based on our policy, we are willing to waive something if it's in the negotiable zone. If it's clearly in the unsafe, intolerable zone, the board would have made a decision that says this is an unacceptable level of risk.
So I'm getting quite a speakers list from having almost none at the beginning, so I'm going to take a little bit of time. I'll come back to you, Director Kuhn, if you have follow-up. I'll go to next. I have Director Yanni DiNardo, Sebring, Nicholson, and then Smith, but I'll go to Director Yanni DiNardo. I just have one comment to make on the specific question you asked around criteria AI, the slope stability factor. Just having seen a report like this from an engineer come to our council, it's about the slope stability of a retaining wall or engineered slope. Those are engineering numbers. I'm not an engineer. If that's the recommendation, I trust that our engineering staff have considered that well. But through to Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, I have a question on, we already have certain thresholds that have already been passed in former developments, and we've seen them in Cowichan Bay, we've seen them, and once engineers have given their stamp of approval, we could not do anything about that. So this is going to help that in the future. And will the rest be grandfathered the way everything is? It remains the way it is. Like, we're not going out seeking things that are falling down that we have done in the past, are we? Like, are we looking for the tolerance, or is there a risk of us doing that as well, and do we have the expertise on that?
Through to Ms. Miller.
Thank you. That's an excellent question as well. We are not looking, the decisions were made in good faith based on the information at the time. So what we're trying to establish is a clear criteria for future decisions. If something comes forward, and you'll see that they are in fact 2 levels, level 1, level 2, which does allow us some sensitivity. So for example, if there is a house that's been developed and someone wants to put an addition on it, the criteria is going to be slightly lower. It's already in place. We're not going to make them retrofit the entire house. So that would be at the discretion of the building manager in terms of working with that particular property owner. It does also give us, for assets that we own and we're responsible for on behalf of the community, we would be looking at this and saying, do our assets, does our infrastructure meet this criteria or not? And if not, it gives us a very clear pathway to apply for and backstop funding requests of other levels of government for upgrades and maintenance to infrastructure to meet that new board-approved criteria.
Thank you. Quick follow-up?
And we do have the expertise currently in CVRD to be doing this. We have the staff.
What we're requesting is that this criteria is followed by the engineers who provide consulting engineering services to developers and CVRD staff. This very clear guideline gives existing staff the ability to follow it. We will be providing training, guidance documents to staff as well as to developers to allow them to basically meet these needs, but we are not training CVRD staff to become geophysical engineers, no.
because just to follow up, sorry.
Quick one, yes.
Only because it's happened a few times, well, it's not so many times, but a few in my area. So once engineers have given a stamp of approval, we can then question that with these guidelines that we're doing with the risk tolerance. Or the stamp of approval doesn't happen until you have gone through.
Sorry, I'll go through to Ms. Miller, but my understanding is an engineer's stamp would only be provided if it met the guidelines.
That's what I need to know.
So in the past, we've asked for an engineered stamp, and typically there's a stamp that says safe for the use intended, which, is that safe this year? Is that for next year? Is that is it safe for one person? Is it safe for 100 people? It's really a very vague standard, and so what we're saying to them is look at the criteria, look at the life loss, and based on the use of the building and the likelihood of the number of people in the building, is it still safe?
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Sebring, then Nicholson, then Smith, and back to Director Kuhn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And some of my questions have been answered. I heard the term unacceptable risk, and I'm wondering, and I get what we're trying to do here, but I'm wondering whether there's any way to estimate what impact this will have on the development process. Is it a case of, if you don't get the engineering stamp that incorporates this new paradigm, you're not going to get your development permit or your building permit? Is this ultimately a veto on the steep slope side, I guess, is my first question.
Through again to staff.
If I may defer to the Chief Building Inspector, who's going to be the lead person on that.
If your mic, you got your mic working?
Got it now.
All right.
Currently, there's no guidelines, so this is going to assist our inspectors in order to issue permits. Right now, it's really at the discretion of the building department with no criteria. So this will make our lives a lot easier. We're still not bound by this. We could actually go above and beyond this, but at least it sets a goalpost for the geotechnical engineers who provide us the reports.
You could go above
Follow up?
You could go above and beyond it. Could you go the opposite of that, whatever that is, below and short of it? I mean, is it fully discretionary, or is this a hard and fast thing?
This will set us a threshold that we would start with.
So
We've a lot of work has gone to it, and I believe that the guidelines have been set out here meet a fairly robust minimal standards.
So these are minimum standards now?
These will be our minimum standards.
So we are making it, just to be clear, we are making it more difficult to get a DP in steep slope areas with this policy, potentially.
I would hate for a rhetorical question like that to be
Yes.
responded to. From the chair, I would say,
I'm sorry, it's not a rhetorical question.
well, you're actually debating with staff. You haven't asked for a
I
follow-up.
don't mean to do that.
No,
I'm sorry.
usually you don't, so I know you got a cold, so I appreciate that.
Thank
But is there anything you can, to respond to that? If I may, I would say that clear guidelines actually help development processes. We've been told time and again, these ethereal, non-specific issues, especially in communities with steep slopes like Ladysmith, cause concern for developers because it seems to be up to an individual engineer to make an assessment. When there's a clear policy guideline, they know what kind of structures they would have to build to achieve the required slope stability, and it actually helps facilitate development. Whereas you'll see that if it's a moving goalpost that there's nothing clearly defined, it can actually cause more frustration. That's my experience, but I would put that through, again, to the building staff.
My fault would be, I think Kate has summed it up very well in saying that up until now, we've accepted the term safe for the use intended, and that is very vague. This gives much clearer guideline as to what we would accept.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Nicholson, and then Smith, and then back to Director Kuhn, hopefully, and then we can call the question.
Thank you. This is very complicated, and I have a request that I went to the workshops, and I remember at the workshops how complicated it was, and I listened, and I had a vague understanding, and I was really comfortable at the end of the workshops with the direction we were going and the policy, the idea of a policy and so forth. Now, those workshops were a number of weeks ago, and I can't remember very much of the detail of the workshops anymore. And so my request is, when we do these kinds of reports, which we obviously aren't experts in this, but we're being asked to approve a policy, it would be really good to have a refresher on how you came up with this policy. Like, where the best practices came from that obviously went into this policy. Just as a reminder, I'm completely comfortable with this, and I will, vote to approve it, but it sort of begs the question of, we need information when we're asked to ask for a decision on something like as complicated as this.
So what I hear is rolling up the workshops into the staff report so that we can be reminded.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. Good feedback. Thank you. Director Smith.
Thank you very much, through the chair. I notice that it says all CVRD, and yet it talks about the CVRD building inspector. So I went to the workshops also, and I'm trying to sort this through my mind that this is going to apply only to electoral areas and not to the municipalities. They're going to do their own risk assessment tolerance policy. And so this is just for electoral areas. Okay. Thank you.
And it's just the legislative division of authority, right? Land use powers between the municipalities and the CVRD are divided, so municipalities will be given that opportunity. And quick follow-up?
A quick follow-up. So do the municipalities have this natural hazard risk tolerance policy?
I think it's dependent. We have, like, for example, in Ladysmith, policies around steep slopes, obviously, that evolve over time, just like these do. But I can't speak for the other municipalities, but I would understand that as part of our, building bylaws, for example, that we would have similar, yeah, under development permit areas. And we have a specific development permit area, for example, in Ladysmith for steep slopes. Yeah, and then multiple development permit areas if you're, say, on a steep slope with riparian areas. And it does cause frustration for developers sometimes, but all those requirements would be layered on the top of a development approval permit. And I'll give you one more follow-up before we go back to the speakers list.
So would this be better under the OCP and
No.
not in?
No, this isn't under our OCP
No,
either.
I'm
It just
saying
refers to.
for electoral areas, would this be better to be under an OCP than a policy?
Not that I'm aware of, but I would put that through to staff. I don't know, maybe it works differently in regional districts, but these things are kept separate within our municipal regulations as well. But it's development permits, building code, and OCP all are layered on any development application. So, and sorry, just to, again, my input, and it's separated from the OCP, so you could make changes without having to go through a formal process to amend the OCP, which is a lot more onerous. Okay. So through to Ms. Miller, is that a correct statement from the?
Absolutely. We're also in the process of modernizing the OCPs, and so at the higher level, the OCPs are meant to be larger documents that establish guiding language around natural hazards and the protection of the community, but I think what we're looking at here is being much more specific as opposed to there should be a development permit in a steep slope area. This says this is the metric that you must meet in order to develop within your property. So the policy is being shared and discussed with North Cowichan staff as well as Ladysmith staff. There's been quite a bit of change across the region, and so it's an opportunity, and the reason why there is a lag between the initial workshops and now is again a lag and a change in staffing. We wanted to make sure that the new general manager of land use services was apprised of it, had an opportunity to provide feedback and be aware of it before it's simply being handed to them. So
Thank you. Director Kuhn, I'm going to go to Director Salmon because he hasn't spoken yet, and then I'll go to you to close, and then hopefully we can call the question.
Just a quick question on the process. So does every local government develop their own criteria? It seems like a lot of reinventing the wheel for what sort of is there not a national standard or guidelines that we rely on?
Ms. Miller, I could answer it, but you're on fire, so.
okay. It is actually quite unusual for local government to have a life loss risk policy. Quite often, it's just left to the consulting environment to say whether or not they think something is safe. The challenge that came up for us when we were working on the climate adaptation strategy is we were identifying areas